Hey everyone, hope you're okay and looking after each other. Remember to get in touch using the email on the school website if you're not sure about anything that you should be doing. So today I'm going to be reading the next part of The Railway Children. So yeah, let's get to it. Chapter 2, Peter's Coal Mine. What fun, said Mother, in the dark, feeling for the matches on the table. How frightened the poor mice were. I don't believe they were rats at all. She struck a match and relit the candle, and everyone looked at each other by its winky blinky light. Well, she said, you've often wanted something to happen, and now it has. This is quite an adventure, isn't it? I told Mrs. Viney to get us some bread and butter and meat and things, and to have supper ready. I suppose she's laid it in the dining room. So, let's go and see. The dining room opened out of the kitchen. It looked much darker than the kitchen when they went in with the one candle, because the kitchen was whitewashed, but the dining room was dark wood from floor to ceiling, and across the ceiling there were heavy black beams. There was a muddled maze of dusty furniture, the breakfast room furniture from the old home where they had lived all their lives. It had seemed a very long time ago and a very long way off. There was the table, certainly, and there were chairs, but there was no supper. Let's look in the other rooms, said Mother, and they looked. And in each room was the same kind of blundering half-arrangement of furniture, and fire irons and crockery, and all sorts of odd things on the floor, but there was nothing to eat. Even in the pantry, there were only a rusty cake tin and a broken plate with whitening mix in it. What a horrid old woman, said Mother. She just walked off with the money and not got us anything to eat at all. Then shan't we have any supper at all? Asked Phyllis, dismayed, stepping back onto a soap dish that cracked responsively. Oh yes, said Mother, only it'll mean unpacking one of those big cases that we put in the cellar. Phil, do you mind where you're walking into? There's a dear. Peter, hold the light. The cellar door opened out of the kitchen. There were 5 wooden steps leading down. It wasn't a proper cellar at all, the children thought, because its ceiling went up as high as the kitchen's. A bacon rack hung under its ceiling. There was wood in it and coal, also the big cases. Peter held the candle all on one side, while Mother tried to open the great packing case. It was very securely nailed down. Where's the hammer? Asked Peter. That's just it, said Mother. I'm afraid it's inside the box. But there's a coal shovel, and there's the kitchen poker. And with these things she tried to get the case open. Let me do it, said Peter, thinking he could do it better himself. Everyone thinks this when he sees another person stirring a fire or opening a box, or untying a knot in a bit of string. You'll hurt your hands, Mummy, said Roberta. Let me. I wish Father was here, said Phyllis. He'd get it open in 2 shakes. What are you kicking me for, Bobby? I wasn't, said Roberta. Just then, the first of the long nails in the packing case began to come out with a scrunch. Then a lathe was raised, and then another, till all 4 stood up with the long nails in them, shining fiercely like iron teeth in the candlelight. Hooray, said Mother. Here are some candles, the very first thing. You girls go and light them. You'll find some saucers and things. Just drop a little candle grease in the saucer and stick the candle upright in it. How many shall we light? As many as ever you like, said Mother gaily. The great thing is to be cheerful. Nobody can be cheerful in the dark except owls and dormice. So the girls lit candles. The head of the first match flew off and struck Phyllis's finger, but as Roberta said, it was only a little burn, and she might have had to be a Roman martyr and be burned whole if she happened to live in the days when those things were fashionable. Then, when the dining room was lit by 14 candles, Roberta fetched coal and wood and lit a fire. It's very cold for May, she said, feeling what a grown-up thing it was to say. The firelight and the candlelight made the dining room look very different, for now you could see that the dark walls were of wood, carved here and there into little wreaths and loops. The girls hastily tidied the room, which meant putting the chairs against the wall and piling the odds and ends into a corner and partly hiding them with the big leather armchair that Father used to sit in after dinner. Bravo, cried Mother, coming in with a tray full of things. There is something like. I'll just get a tablecloth and then... The tablecloth was in a box with a proper lock that was opened with a key and not with a shovel. And when the cloth was spread on the table, a real feast was laid out on it. Everyone was very, very tired, but everyone cheered up at the sight of the funny and delightful supper. There were biscuits, the Marie and plain kind, sardines, preserved ginger, cooking raisins, and candied peel and marmalade. What a good thing Aunt Emma packed up all the odds and ends out of the store cupboard, said Mother. Now, Phil, don't put the marmalade spoon in among the sardines. No, I won't, Mother, said Phyllis, and put it down among the Marie biscuits. Let's drink Aunt Emma's health, said Roberta. Suddenly, what should we have done if she hadn't have packed these things? Here's to Aunt Emma. And the toast was drunk in ginger wine and water out of willow pattern teacups because the glasses couldn't be found. They all felt that they had been a little hard on Aunt Emma. She wasn't a nice cuddly person like Mother, but after all, it was she who had thought of packing up the odds and ends of things to eat. It was Aunt Emma too, who had aired all the sheets ready, and the men who had moved the furniture had put the bedsteads together so that the beds were soon made. Good night, chickies, said Mother. I'm sure there aren't any rats, but I'll leave my door open, and then if a mouse comes you need only scream and I'll come and tell it exactly what I think of it. Then she went to her own room. Roberta woke to hear the little travelling clock chime too. It sounded like a church clock, ever so far away, she always thought, and she heard, too, Mother still moving about in her room. Next morning, Roberta woke Phyllis by pulling her hair gently, but quite enough for her purpose. What's the matter? Asked Phyllis, still almost wholly asleep. Wake up, said Roberta. We're in the new house, don't you remember? No servants or anything. Let's get up and begin to be useful. We'll just creep downstairs quietly and have everything beautiful before Mother gets up. I've woken Peter. He'll be dressed as soon as we are. So they dressed quietly and quickly. Of course, there was no water in their room, so when they got down, they washed as much as they thought was necessary under the spout of the pump in the yard. One pumped and the other washed. It was splashy, but interesting. It's much more fun than basin washing, said Roberta. How sparkly the weeds are between the stones and the moss on the roof. Oh, and the flowers. The roof of the back kitchen sloped down quite low. It was made of thatch and it had moss on it, and house leeks and stonecrop and wallflowers, and even a clump of purple flag flowers at the far corner. This is far, far, far and away prettier than the Edgecombe Villa, said Phyllis. I wonder what the garden's like. We mustn't think of the garden yet, said Roberta with earnest energy. Let's go in and begin to work. They lit the fire and put the kettle on, and they arranged the crockery for breakfast. They could not find all the right things, but a glass ashtray made an excellent salt cellar, and a newish baking tin seemed as if it would do to put the bread on, if they had any. When there seemed to be nothing more that they could do, they went out again into the fresh, bright morning. We'll go into the garden now, said Peter, but somehow they couldn't find the garden. They went round the house and round the house again. The yard occupied the back, and across it were stables and outbuildings. On the other three sides the house stood simply in a field, without a yard of garden to divide it from the short, smooth turf. And yet they had certainly seen the garden wall the night before. It was a hilly country. Down below they could see the line of the railway and the black yawning mouth of a tunnel. The station was out of sight. There was a great bridge with tall arches running across one end of the valley. Never mind the garden, said Peter. Let's go down and look at the railway. There might be trains passing. We can see them from here, said Roberta. Let's sit down a bit. So they all sat down on a flat grey stone that had pushed itself up out of the grass. It was one of many that lay about on the hillside, and when Mother came out to look for them at 8 o'clock, she found them deeply asleep in a contented, sun-warmed bunch. They had made an excellent fire, and had set the kettle on it at about 5:30, so that by 8 The fire had been out for some time, the water had boiled away, and the bottom was burned out of the kettle. Also, they had not thought of washing the crockery before they set the table. "But it doesn't matter, the cups and saucers I mean," said Mother, "because I've found another room. I'd quite forgotten there was one, and it's magic, and I've boiled the water for tea in a saucepan." The forgotten room opened out of the kitchen. In the agitation and half-darkness the night before, its door had been mistaken for a cupboard's. It was a little square room, and on its table, all nicely set out, was a joint of cold roast beef, with bread, butter, cheese, and a pie. "Pie for breakfast," cried Peter. "How perfectly ripping." "It isn't pigeon pie," said Mother. "It's only apple." "Well, this is the supper we ought to have had last night." And there was a note from Mrs. Viney. "Her son-in-law has broken his arm, and she had to get home early. She's coming this morning at 10. That was a wonderful breakfast. It is unusual to begin the day with cold apple pie, but the children all said they would rather have it than meat. "You see, it's more like dinner than breakfast to us," said Peter, passing his plate for more, "because we were up so early." The day passed in helping Mother to unpack and arrange things. 6 small legs quite ached with running about while their owners carried clothes and crockery and all sorts of things to their proper places. It was not till quite late in the afternoon that Mother said, "There, that'll do for today. I'll lie down for an hour so as to be fresh as a lark by supper time." Then they all looked at each other. Each of the 3 expressive countenances expressed the same thought. That thought was double and consisted, like the bits of information in the child's guide to knowledge, of a question and an answer. "Where shall we go?" "To the railway." So to the railway they went, and as soon as they started for the railway they saw where the garden had hidden itself. It was right behind the stables, and it had a high wall all around. "Oh, never mind about the garden now," cried Peter. "Mother told me this morning where it was. It'll keep till tomorrow. Let's go to the railway." The way to the railway was all downhill over smooth, short turf, with here and there furze bushes and grey and yellow rocks sticking out like candied peel from the top of a cake. The way ended in a steep run and a wooden fence, and there was the railway with the shining metals and the telegraph wires and posts and signals. They all climbed onto the top of the fence, and then suddenly there was a rumbling sound that made them look along the line to the right, where the dark mouth of the tunnel opened itself in the face of a rocky cliff. Next moment, a train had rushed out of the tunnel with a shriek and a snort, and had slid noisily past them. They felt the rush of its passing, and the pebbles on the line jumped and rattled under it as it went by. "Oh," said Roberta, drawing a long breath. "It was like a great dragon tearing by." "Did you feel it fan us with its hot wings?" "I suppose a dragon's lair might look very like the tunnel from the outside," said Phyllis. But Peter said, "I never thought we should ever get as near to a train as this. It's the most ripping sport." "Better than toy engines, isn't it?" said Roberta. "I'm tired of calling Roberta by her name. I don't see why I should. No one else did. Everyone else called her Bobby, and I don't see why I shouldn't." "I know. It's different," said Peter. "It seems so odd to see all of a train. It's awfully tall, isn't it?" "We've always seen them cut in half by platforms," said Phyllis. "I wonder if that train was going to London," Bobby said. "London's where Father is." "Let's go down to the station and find out," said Peter. So they went. They walked along the edge of the line and heard the telegraph wires humming over their heads. When you are in a train, it seems such a little way between post and post, and one after another the posts seem to catch up with the wires almost more quickly than you can count them. But when you have to walk, the posts seem few and far between. But the children got to the station at last. Never before had any of them been at a station, except for the purpose of catching trains or perhaps waiting for them, and always with grown-ups in attendance, grown-ups who were not always themselves interested in stations, except as places from which they wished to get away. Never before had they passed close enough to a signal box to be able to notice the wires and to hear the mysterious ping-ping followed by the strong, firm clicking of machinery. The very sleepers on which the rails lay were a delightful path to travel by, just far enough apart to serve as the stepping stones in a game of foaming torrents hastily organised by Bobby. Then, to arrive at the station, not through the booking office, but in a freebooting sort of way by the sloping end of the platform. This in itself was joy. Joy, too, it was to peep in the porter's room where the lamps are, and the railway almanac on the wall, and one porter half asleep behind a paper. There were a great many crossing lines at the station. Some of them ran into a yard and stopped short as though they were tired of business and meant to retire for good. Trucks stood on the rails here, and on one side was a great heap of coal, not a loose heap such as you see in your coal cellar, but a sort of solid building of coals with large square blocks of coal outside, used just as though they were bricks, and built up till the heap had looked like the pictures of the cities of the plain in the Bible stories for infants. There was a line of whitewash near the top of the coaly wall. When presently the porter lounged out of his room at the twice-repeated tingling thrill of a gong over the station door, Peter said, "How do you do?" in his best manner, and hastened to ask what the white mark was on the coal for. "To mark how much coal there be," said the porter, "so as we'll know if anyone nicks it. So don't you go off with none in your pockets, young gentleman." This seemed at the time but a merry jest, and Peter felt at once that the porter was a friendly sort with no nonsense about him. But later, the words came back to Peter with a new meaning. I hope you enjoyed that, and Mrs. Hirage will be reading the next part for you soon. See you soon. Bye bye.